Hello, my name is Angela Davis, and I'm doing my chapter summary in the book of Quantitative Research in Education by Wayne Hoy and Kurt Adams. The chapter that I'll be discussing is Chapter 1 in the nature of research and science. In summary, I started off with ways of knowing in dealing with research, which is there are 4 basic ways of knowing. The first one is method of tenacity, which refers to the fact that people hold to certain beliefs because they have always known these beliefs to be true. And basically, that's what that's saying is once people believe in something, they look for evidence to confirm that belief and ignore disconfirming instances. The second one is method of authority. It's anchored in the statements of experts. And basically what that is it's an idea that has public support of it must be true. So individuals who turn to those in authority, such as maybe their church, their leaders, their superiors, or experts. The third is method of intuition, which is built on assumptions that are obvious, such as propositions, or accepted as self-evident. And also, they may agree with reason, but not necessarily with experience. The fourth one, method of science or reflective inquiry, and that's basically fixing the belief. Moving on, within the summary, in the book, it talks about the nature of science. It talks about organizational science. And that's basically attempts to describe and explain regularities in the behavior of individuals, groups within the organizations. Organizations, scientists, basically basic principles that provide a general understanding of what the structure and the dynamics of the organizational life and recent goals in education administration. Then there's science, and it's a dynamic process of experimentation and observation that produces an interconnect set of principles, which in turn generates further experimentation and observation and refinement. Also, let's see, empirical nature of science. Empirical, which basically refers to the evidence based on observation, and empirical evidence in science is based on the experimentation and observation, which is measured and controlled. Science is an empirical approach to knowledge, and scientific knowledge is based on a systematic and controlled studies of hypothetical explanations. Then in the book, it talked about scientific tools. It talked about inferential statistics, which basically provides mathematical ways to see if the results are likely a function of chance. Basically, it questions, did these results of the experiment occur by chance, or if some systematic influence produced the outcomes of it. Deduction is a logical method of deriving specific predictions and hypotheses from a general set of assumptions. Basically, that is moving from the general premises to specific predictions and conclusions. Then we have induction. Here, the researchers move from a series of observations in a variety of situations to a generalization that captures the basic tendencies in the observation. We have abduction, which is the process of studying a number of phenomena, observing their patterns, and formulating a causal hypothesis. Then we go back in talking about the scientific approach, which is a process of reflective inquiry. The approach has 4 basic steps. Okay, the first basic step is the identification and definition of the problem. So the problem, that's the first step. The second step is the formulation of the hypothesis to solve the problem. So the second step is hypothesis. The third is the logical analysis of the implications of the hypothesis, and that's reasoning. And the fourth is testing to collaborate or reject the hypothesis, and that's testing. Again, research problem is the first, which is question, which carefully states and guides the research. Then we have the hypothesis, which is the generalization with limited empirical support. Then we have reasoning, which is the ability to think logically, to formulate fair judgments and justify the positions. And then last, we have testing, which is the process of evaluating the system or its components with the intent to find whether it satisfies the specific requirements or not. Then the chapter talks about experimental and non-experimental or ex post facto research. And experimental research is a study that you have to believe in scientific research design. It includes a hypothesis, a variable that can be manipulated by the researcher, and variables that can be measured, calculated, and compared. Then we have, which is the non-experimental or ex post facto research. The situation, which is basically it cannot be manipulated because the change in the independent variable has already occurred. Then we have, which is the independent variable, and that's a variable whose variation does not depend on that of another. Basically, there's a number of conditions. Basically, with the independent variable, again, that does not depend on another as far as comparing it to just a basic variable. Now, there are a number of conditions that must be met to have a good experiment that they discussed in this chapter. One is subjects should be selected at random. Then subjects should be assigned groups or at random. Next, the experimental and control groups should be selected at random. And finally, the researchers must manipulate the independent variable. That is, apply an intervention or a treatment to the experimental groups and withhold treatment and to withhold treatment from basically the control group. Basically, the experimental research is systematic, empirical inquiry, where the research introduced the change, the notes, effects, and have full control over the design of the study. And basically, this is just a summary of Chapter 1 again. And this is Chapter 1, the nature of research and science. Thank you.